If the NFL played in a March Madness tournament, which offenses would lead their team to make the Sweet 16, Elite 8, and Final Four? We go through the bracket to determine the top 2024 fantasy offenses on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. When I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy betting, draft, free agency, you name it, and a little bit of March Madness as well at sportingnews.com. And I'm excited for this crossover episode, Michelle.
Oh, it's going to be a fun one today. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So we're going to play a fun little game today. March Madness is starting for college basketball, at least the first round, right? The real first round of March Madness today. So we wanted to do a little March Madness tournament with NFL offenses. And this is all predicting how they're going to be in 2024 when it comes to fantasy points, right? Like, it's not about how good you are as an actual NFL player. Are you going to produce fantasy points for us as an offense? So we're going to start with the Sweet 16 because we can't do as big of a tournament as college football. There's only 32 teams. So let's start with the top 16 fantasy offenses in 2024. You and I, before this episode, came together and picked like 12 that were really easy to put in, right? Or relatively easy. And then we're going to figure out our last four and talk through those for the Sweet 16. So in no particular order, these are the top 12 teams inside the top 16. That's the 49ers, the Lions, Eagles, Bengals, Rams, Falcons, Bills, Texans, Ravens, Dolphins, Chiefs, and Jets. But we need to figure out the last four that fit into the top 16 and make it to the Sweet 16. Give me your first option here, Vinny, that you believe should make it into the Sweet 16.
Well, throw out the Green Bay Packers. I mean, they really ascended as a
I knew you were
scoring
going to pick them right away. They're your favorite.
Yeah.
You love them.
Well, I mean, their scoring really improved. I mean, they were in the top 10 scoring last year. They are an ascending offense with Josh Jacobs there. So you figure they have potential to score a few more touchdowns. They have a more wide variety of options. I don't know where you would go necessarily at wide receiver beyond Jaden Reed, but I think we're going to see some things happen there where someone's going to have some viability. It may not be attaching to one single guy, but there's some upside there when you look at Romeo Doubs, when you look at Christian Watson, you look at the two tight ends. There's something there that you could look at, but you feel great about Jaden Reed, Josh Jacobs, Jordan Love. This is the core of what they're doing here. So, yeah, this is an offense that's ascending, and I think they still could go after more help in the draft, offensive tackle to help them, and Love throw downfield. These weapons could emerge a little bit more. Keep in mind, Doubs and Watson couldn't really stay healthy all last year. So if you get them healthy with Reed, you're in business here with the Packers. So an ascending offense, again, you can see it by their points per game last year. So they're a strong candidate to crash this party here.
Yeah, the issue is there might be a lot of points, but they might be spread out, right? I don't know how good that is for fantasy in terms of like actually rostering these guys, but Jordan Love can be a top 10 quarterback. We've already seen it. Josh Jacobs can be a top 5 running back in this offense. Jaden Reed, if he does break out, could be a top 15 guy. And then you just need Musgrave or Tucker Kraft, really one of those guys to own that top spot to give you that true like third piece there in that offense as a receiver that you feel good about. I'll say one that I think should definitely make the Sweet 16. It's the Indianapolis Colts. So with Anthony Richardson, if he can stay healthy, we know what kind of upside he has at the position. Jonathan Taylor has top 3 upside at the running back position. Michael Pittman Jr., top 10, with the targets he gets, he can be even higher than that. And then you have Josh Downs, who's a viable flex play at times. So I think they're a really good fantasy offense when you're predicting what the 2024 season has ahead. I really think they belong in this group of the Sweet 16.
Yeah, it's very similar because you have an ascending quarterback. You have a clear number one receiver who can line up in a lot of places in Michael Pittman. You also have the clear workhorse running back in Jonathan Taylor. Now, the other things kind of have to come together. Same thing with between Alec Pierce and Josh Downs. Maybe they draft a wide receiver, right, to really stand out in this group. The other thing they could look at, and they've been rumored to take this player a lot if he slips, is Brock Bowers and clean up the tight end room a little bit. They didn't really go
I
after
would love that
or
so
think
much.
about any tight ends. So if they get a tight end there that's a little bit clear cut, then they might move ahead of the Packers. But the bottom line is, I mean, the tie in with both these teams, rising offenses, well schemed, well coached, and you have a quarterback with a lot of upside, not only with their big arms and passing, but we know Jordan Love produced a little on the ground to supplement the stats, and we know Anthony Richardson can have a big part in doing that should he stay healthy this season.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Vinny, because if Kirk Cousins were not to leave, this team would have been an easy pick. They would have been in our top
Yeah.
12 teams that are going to, have a chance to compete for the Elite Eight here. But it's the Vikings. But are we able to put them into the Sweet 16 without having, let's say, point guard, right? But they don't have their quarterback. There is no quarterback on the roster that you feel good about. It's Sam Darnold. We'll see who they add in the draft. But you do still have Aaron Jones, who has top 12 upside at running back. You have Justin Jefferson, the wide receiver one upside, the wide receiver one, Jordan Addison, and then TJ Hawkinson, if he's to come back and be healthy. Is that enough to push them into the Sweet 16, even though they don't have the quarterback right now?
Well, I said the quarterback that lands there, I'm going to be very interested in that guy, assuming it's not going to be Sam Darnold starting, because again, I mean, look at everything. I mean, they have Christian Darrisaw too. That's going to keep that quarterback protected, and then you've got the guys downfield, as we mentioned, with Jefferson and Addison, and hopefully T.J. Hawkinson doesn't linger with his injury and can come back on the early side. Hopefully by week one he can be ready. So if that's the case, and you got three nice weapons, you got Aaron Jones again. This is the upgrade there from what they had last year. So it's funny the Packers move on from Aaron Jones and they upgrade with Josh Jacobs, and the Vikings are able to get Jones to upgrade big time. So it's a good offense for sure. I think they have a strong case to make it here. Yeah, the thing that's missing is a quarterback. In other cases that we can explore, the Steelers were still sorting out their quarterback situation. The Bears were not sure what they're going to get from Caleb Williams. They have some offensive line concerns as well. I mean, they have potential, as we broke down, just like the Falcons, to be much improved and crash this party. But maybe there's room for all four NFC North offenses, the Lions being the best, but the Packers, Vikings, Bears, maybe it's just going to be all of a sudden this high scoring division. It used to be known as a black and blue division, but they've had some good quarterbacks over the years. And maybe this is that era again when you add Caleb Williams and maybe JJ McCarthy to Jordan Love and Jared Goff playing really well. So it'll be a lot of fun. I think the Bears have a case as good as any. I think the Vikings also have a pretty good case here.
If you had to choose one or the other, because we're going to assume Caleb Williams is with the Bears, you got DeAndre Swift, top 10 ability at running back. DJ Moore, we saw what he did this past year. Keenan Allen, we've seen what he's done his whole career. And then Cole Kmet, I don't think he's going to be very good for fantasy this year with all these other targets, but he has been a somewhat reliable fantasy tight end. I don't know. You can play him at times. But if you had to pick one between the Bears and the Vikings to make the Sweet 16, which team would you go with?
I think there's one clear person who breaks his tie. It's Justin Jefferson. So I
Okay.
think he helps. I mean, I trust Aaron Jones a little bit more than DeAndre Swift, weirdly enough, because I think he's a little bit more reliable if he's put in higher leverage situations. You have Justin Jefferson is probably better than DJ Moore, so that helps. And then Hawkinson clears it up, right? When you have a tight end committee potentially with Kmet and Everett. And look, we could get Drake May in Minnesota, and that could be really darn good for Drake May. He could end up being just like last year's number 2 pick, CJ Stroud, and end up in the best situation and produce. So I'm interested to see that. But yeah, it really depends. I mean, the thing is, we don't know, right, what that rookie quarterback's going to do. That would be the thing that really decides it here. Who's the better sleeper? They just need to have a quarterback who can finish as a sneaky QB1, maybe in the back end in a deeper league, and then you'll know later in the season who emerged here as a Sweet 16 team.
I'll say, so we have to figure out, we have 15 to 16 teams right now. The Bears are still an option here. Is there any of these other offenses here that possibly could sneak in? The Seahawks, the Browns, the Jaguars, maybe the Steelers. I don't think they deserve to be in the Sweet 16 with just Russell, Najee, Pickens, Freiermuth. Like, I don't think they make it there. But the Seahawks, Browns, or Jaguars, do they beat out the Bears to make the final spot in the Sweet 16?
Yeah, I mean, you weigh these offenses; they do have limited options. The Seahawks actually might have the most with DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith, and Najigba being a bigger part of the offense. You would figure this year and spreading the ball out to just like the Washington offense we saw. That's what they're borrowing, and they had three very sustainable receivers. So Smith and Najigba comes through at JSN with Metcalf and Lockett. I don't know what you're going to get, but they did clear up tight ends. So they did get rid of some guys. Parkinson and Disley are not there. So maybe Noah Fant might actually do something as a solo tight end. They did pay him quite a bit to keep him. So there's something there.
And you
Like
have
Fant
Kenneth
is
Walker. Like, it's a pretty good
yeah,
fantasy
Walker.
offense. I
Yeah.
think it's
You
just
have the
Geno
backfield,
Smith.
Charbonnet, not bad,
Yeah.
right? So I think the Seahawks have a little bit more trust. And again, if you watch Washington's offense, they're pretty good. They're prolific. They obviously have a lot of prospects in this draft, and getting that type of offense, they're moving them over to Seattle. I think is really great here. So, do I think the Seahawks are a bit underrated in terms of a scheme change and the weapons they have? Again, Geno Smith, that could be the one thing that takes them out. But again, quarterback, I think, is a variable with all these teams.
Okay, so the bubble teams that made it are the Seahawks, the Vikings, the Packers, and the Colts. The Bears are the biggest snub of the
Yeah,
tournament. They're out. They're the first
yeah.
one out. And then the Browns are just out, the Jaguars are just out, and the Steelers are out. So we got our Sweet 16, and now we're gonna go on to the Elite Eight in our next segment.
Yeah, that'll be fun to kind of eliminate and add more teams here at the same time. All right. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and it's a great time to get in on the action on FanDuel, right? It's March Madness. We talked about it, and you filled out your brackets. Tip off is happening. So say goodbye to those busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. So you can recover first round. Look, if some of your upsets didn't come through, it doesn't matter. You're going to get more rounds to have the action, a lot more games to get into. So whether you're betting on a big upset or number one seed to come through as expected, it's time to go dancing on America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's right, $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all with a futures bet. Maybe you like UConn, maybe you like someone else, but that's your opportunity to do that at FanDuel Sportsbook. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets in the Final Four in Phoenix. All right, Michelle, let's get into the late eight here. So we looked at these bubble teams. So those teams that just made it are not there. But let's look at, I think we have to say,
We had those top 12 teams from the top there. So we have to
yeah,
now those 12 teams that were easy to put into the Sweet 16, we have to dwindle that list to 8. So
yeah,
again, those were the 49ers, Lions, Eagles, Bengals, Rams, Falcons, Bills, Texans, Ravens, Dolphins, Chiefs, and Jets. That's 12 top offenses that we feel good about next year. We need to pick the favorite 8. So which ones are out? Which ones are you saying definitely are in? Like the 49ers in, right?
yeah. 49ers, we'll talk about them again. I think the Lions also get a pass
Yeah.
here. I think
Lions are
you have to,
making it to to
yeah,
the
they're
Elite
in.
Eight for sure.
Yeah, I think you may eliminate, I would say, I'm saying for depth purposes, I think you eliminate the Dolphins, right? There's not as much there. I do like the Dolphins and what they have, but they don't have a lot. And Tua's a little bit borderline, right, with his quarterback value. So I'm going to take out the Dolphins. It has been a great offseason for them. We'll see if Raheem Mostert can hold up. I don't think he's going to duplicate that. I think you may only have one viable back in Devin Chan this year. And again, you're down to Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. They're getting older here. And Tua is a little bit of a wild card. And again, Jonas Smith doesn't move the needle for me at tight end.
Yeah, I'm with you there because it's really Tyreek with that really high upside. Waddle is way too inconsistent. And well, yeah, Achan was great to start his career, but we don't know if that's gonna. I mean, he was so incredibly efficient. We don't know if that's gonna last. Mostert's getting older, so I'm with you. They would be out among this group. They don't make the Elite Eight here. Made the Sweet 16, not the Elite Eight. Now, I'll say for sure the Eagles should be in the Elite Eight, right? You got Hurts, Saquon, AJ Brown,
Yeah.
Devonta Smith, Goddard. Like, yeah. But one team I probably would kick out, and this is a hard one because I really like these pieces. It's the Rams, and it's because Stafford's not that clear-cut top 12 fantasy quarterback. Kyron Williams was fantastic last year, and I do expect him to continue, but he's smaller. He might not be as safe with the injury risk, right? And then Cooper Kupp really fell off last year, and Puka had an amazing rookie season, but he did go through that time where it was just really bad, right? Where they kind of hurt each other with Cooper Kupp and Puka, and then they don't have a tight end that you even want to play. Like I'm not interested in any of them. So I don't think they would make the Elite Eight. They're a really good offense, but I think they just miss out.
Yeah, that's a good call. I mean, again, the depth of that, and again, Cooper Kupp fading, that's also something we consider with Stafford getting older. I mean, they're thinking about potentially drafting his replacement even as high as the first round. They got Jimmy Garoppolo. Now is a bit of a contingency off the bench here after he has a little suspension. So I think you get rid of the Dolphins and Rams. And then I think you also say goodbye, I think, to the Jets. We need to see a little bit more from Aaron Rodgers. You can't just assume that he's going to come back and distribute the way that he was before and return to MVP form. We just can't. It's another major injury. He's gotten a little bit older. The Packers moved on from him, obviously. So we'll see what he has left. We have no idea what he has left for the Jets here. So I think you take them out. The Jets, Dolphins, you can sideline them here as well as the Rams. And now, I don't know.
I actually had the Jets in, I'll say. So
Really?
if I had to pick them, so I do think we have Breece Hall here sitting at the RB2 for what people expect next year, right? He's going right after CMC. And then you have Garrett Wilson, who we know has top 10 upside with Aaron Rodgers. Mike Williams, I personally love. So I do believe that he has that upside if he can stay healthy. So I love for fantasy that it's very clear cut who's going to get the targets and who's going to get the workload, which I like. And Rodgers is still really good. So one team I think I would have the Jets over, it would be a team like the Bills. And I guess with Josh Allen, that might knock him over because Josh Allen is that quarterback one, like the quarterback one. But after that, you have James Cook, who's inconsistent, Stephon Diggs, who fell off so hard. So if you're going to put them in, you have to say he's going to come back to life. Curtis Samuel doesn't do it for me. And then Dalton Kincaid was okay for part of the season, but not like that top 5 guy. So I think like with the upside of the Jets is just higher than with these Bills options right now.
Yeah, I think I would take out the Jets and the Bills out of this. So, and the Dolphins. So really, I'm not really nice to the AFC East in this segment, but yeah, I would take them out. I think the debate then, I don't know. I think it might come down to like, do we include the Chiefs? As funny as it sounds, that might be the question. I think we settle on the 49ers, Lions, Eagles. And maybe it comes down to the Chiefs and the upstart Falcons. But again, the Falcons have some variables. And then I think maybe one more team we could throw in, the Ravens, right? Because they don't have a lot of wide receiver that we can attach to at this point with the way things are going. I mean, they have Zay Flowers, but what are they going to do beyond that? Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson. We'll see what Mark Andrews has left. So, yeah, the Chiefs are an interesting one, but I'm always going to side in favor of the Chiefs and them doing it. So we might have actually 9 offenses in the Elite Eight if we can do that, but we're not allowed to do that. So
no, we're not. Look, someone has to leave. So again, the 49ers, Lions, Eagles, and then we also have in the Bengals top 8, Texans. They were just too fun last year. I have them top 8. So I think it comes down to the Ravens, Falcons, Chiefs, Jets, and one of those teams have to go. And I did have the Chiefs going. I think you're higher than on them than I am. Pacheco is what? He ended as running back 16 last year, and I think that's like the best he's going to get. Rashee Rice, we're projecting he gets much better, but that's a projection. Kelsey's getting older. I don't really care about Hollywood Brown all that much. And Mahomes, he wasn't a very good fantasy option last year. We all expect that to get better. Does that beat out the Cousins, Bijan, London, Mooney, Pitts? I don't think so. The Ravens with Lamar with that upside, Derrick Henry and Mark Andrews, and then you still throw in Zay Flowers. So I will say it comes down to the Chiefs or Jets. I'm okay with putting the Chiefs in over the Jets if you want to.
Yeah, I'm going to put the Chiefs in for other purposes as well for what we're going to reveal in our Final Four. So I need to put the Chiefs in. I'm taking them. They might be kicked out, but they're a sleeper. I can't believe I have to say a team with Patrick Mahomes is a sleeper in this tournament, but I have to say it here. They have Mahomes, and he can take over and lead a team a long way. So he's one of those guys. He's probably the point guard, the power forward, the shooting guard, all of them wrapped into one, that he can carry a team pretty far. So I'll be interested to see what our final fours look like here. I think we've given away possibly two of the teams, but our other two teams are going to be very interesting.
Yeah, so we got our Elite Eight, and it's the 49ers, Lions, Eagles, Bengals, Texans, Ravens, Falcons, Chiefs. The teams that lost, the Jets, the Bills, the Dolphins, and the Rams, they are out of this tournament. We're going to go on and make our final four, and then also give you our championship team for the 2024 fantasy offense right in our next segment. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Read a book, go out to dinner, get a workout in. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what is important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. I personally utilize online therapy a ton over the past few years, and I cannot explain to you how much it's helped me with my life, with my anxiety, my irritability. It's just helped me understand the way that I act more. And my therapist has done amazing things. I cannot say enough good things about my experience. And I believe everyone could really benefit from using online therapy. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you don't have to stress because you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. This is where it's going to get hard because there's a lot of good offenses, and we have to now take these top 8 offenses and dwindle them down to 4. Who's your number 1 that's in? I think we agree with this, so we can make the first choice of the final 4 selection. Oh, you're muted, Vinny.
Sorry about that. I'm back. I just realized one thing. The highest scoring offense from last year is not on this list. It's the Dallas Cowboys, but at this recording, they don't have a running back that we can trust. They only have one receiver in CD Lamb. We're got to figure out if we're going to trust Brandon Cooks. So that's a notable omission. So the Cowboys again.
That is because we didn't even have them in the Sweet 16. They
Yeah.
probably should have been in the Sweet 16.
Well,
but
they're out
oops.
because, again, I don't think they have a lot of depth. I think Dak is probably going to have a regression anyway with CD Lamb. I don't think he can have that monstrous of a season with the targets. And again, they don't have a running back. We need a good running back to trust to get into this conversation. The 49ers do have that. I would say the Cowboys are most overrated team right now in that sense. The Cowboys are out, but the 49ers are clearly in. I mean, there's nothing you have to worry about. Right now, they haven't traded Brandon Ayuk. So they have Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, of course, Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy still has some. They're clearly the best.
all the
There's
way
no
across.
question.
All the way across, you have
Yeah.
fantasy value.
Yeah,
Easy.
so yes, we're muting the Cowboys, getting them out of here. 49ers, clear number 1 overall seed. If we had to do that, the favorite to win it all, I think you would take them. But the surprising team might be the number 2 team here, the second team in the tournament. I would say it's the Lions. I mean, they are the team that finished second in the NFC to the 49ers and almost took them down. But I think the Lions actually got better, and there could be even more improvement here in the draft.
Yeah, so you and I both had the 49ers and Lions as our top 2 seeds. Our last 2 are different. But the Lions, you go all the way across again. You have Jahmyr Gibbs, but then also David Montgomery, and they're both so heavily involved that you can get fantasy points from them. But you also have the upside of Gibbs being a top 5 running back. Amon-Ra St. Brown is absolutely fantastic. I mean, he's such a consistent fantasy asset, top 5 wide receiver. You have Laporta. He's going to be drafted as the tight end 1 this season in many, many leagues. And Jared Goff at home, but at least right? You know when to play Jared Goff. At home, top tier fantasy asset. And then away, you just don't play him. That's okay. But just such a good fantasy offense there. So then we differ with our last 2 teams in. And I want to give my first one first. And it's the Bengals. And I understand why some people might not have him, but with my love with Zach Moss, I love the running back room here with Zach Moss. And you have Joe Burrow, who's coming back from injury, but we know when he's healthy and out there, he's going to be great with his Jamar Chase and T Higgins. Obviously they would not make the top 4 if T Higgins gets traded. But if they keep T. Higgins, they stay in here. And then at least they added Mike Gesicki. So they have someone to pass to with a tight end. But you have 4 options there where I think Burrow's a top 8 guy. Moss can be top 12, 15. Chase, we know, can be top 3, and Higgins can be top 12. So just so many good options there that I'm putting them as my third team in the final 4.
Yeah, I'm going with the team that actually was the highest, well, second highest scoring team, but definitely the best scoring team in the NFC 2 years ago. The Chiefs were actually the first, and I might have given away my 4th team here. But when you look at the Eagles, they're loaded, right? I mean, and I also think this Kellen Moore offense is going to be really good for them. I mean, yeah, now Saquon Barkley, they're in the mix, and we know what Devonta Smith and AJ Brown can do. Dallas Goedert should stay healthy and have a bigger year here. He's still the 3rd option, and they could add another receiver in the draft. And you have Jalen Hurts, who's pretty consistent here overall. Their offensive line is taking some hits. Jason Kelsey is retired. They're trying to shuffle and figure out the rest here, but they should be okay. I mean, up front and just the scheme with Kellen Moore. I mean, it's very interesting that the Eagles have made this transition. Shane Steichen, they were disappointed with the offense last year with Brian Johnson. So now they go after Kellen Moore. We know Kellen Moore's offenses have put up some numbers last year with the Chargers. I think that was an exception with all their injuries, but with the Cowboys, they were really lighting it up here and balanced and explosive. So I think that influence puts the Eagles back in the right direction. So I do like the Bengals. I need to see a little bit of Joe Burrow being fully healthy. We'll see what we do at tight end. I don't know what we'll get from Zach Moss, but that's the thing to look at there.
Yeah, so my last team came down to the Eagles or the Texans, and I went with the Texans because I get you with the Eagles, and they're a very fair team to have into the Final Four. Definitely. All the way across, you have good fantasy assets. But with the Texans, I think they're going to be cheaper in the draft compared to all these other guys, right? Compared to Hurts, Mixon's going to be cheaper than Saquon, Collins and Dell cheaper than AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, and Schultz cheaper than Goddard. And I think all of them can provide pretty much the same exact fantasy value, if not more. Probably Hurts beats out Stroud, but Mixon's going to have more opportunities to score touchdowns because he's not going to be stolen or like all the touchdowns aren't going to be stolen from Jalen Hurts like they will be with Saquon Barkley. We saw Nico Collins just end as a top 8 wide receiver this year. Do I think it's the same? No, but it's because I think Tank Dell is going to be so highly involved and be so good. And then Dalton Schultz is a very solid fantasy option. He's been more solid than Dallas Goedert. So I slightly lean the Texans, but I understand why you have the Eagles in there. So those are my top 4: 49ers, Lions, Bengals, and Texans.
Yeah, I have the Chiefs in there. Again, I don't see this Andy Reid offense having another down year. I think Marquise Hollywood Brown is pretty big. They know Rashee Rice is established now. So they've got their 3 guys between those 2 guys, Travis Kelsey coming back, not slowing down, looking good in the playoffs. So Isaiah Pacheco, again, he could be a bigger fantasy asset because they don't have Jerick McKinnon. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was also not re-signed here, so that could help Pacheco's value, right? He's not going to maybe compete for these key touches around the field. So, again, Hollywood Brown really does this for me. Again, he can just kind of seamlessly go in there and be the big play threat that they need, that third receiver to round things out. And Patrick Mahomes, look, 2 years ago, he was massive, right? That we saw this, what are they going to do with Tyreek Hill gone and all that? Well, he produced big time. And I think last year was just a little bit off. They were figuring things out throughout the season. They got it rolling in the playoffs at the right time, obviously, and their offense really came through when it needed to most in the Super Bowl. So I think they build on that momentum from the last month. And I can't believe I have to sell you on the Chiefs here in the Final 4. But that's what it comes down to. This is a good thing for fantasy because that means a lot of teams can go all the way, so to speak, and put up the best fantasy numbers here all around.
I'd say so. There's 2 teams we left out, right? The Falcons and the Ravens.
Yeah.
That neither of us answered. And I'll say I understand why we don't have the Falcons because it's a lot of it's projection. We're hoping Cousins is fine after the Achilles. We're hoping Bijan gets more touches. We're hoping Drake London and Pitts can break out with Kirk Cousins. So I get why you would choose the Chiefs over them, but I don't understand the Chiefs over the Ravens because Lamar has the same upside in fantasy as Mahomes, if not more. Henry has way more upside than Pacheco, and I think a similar floor. And then you're comparing Zay Flowers to Rashee Rice. I do think they have the same upside. And then it's Andrews and Kelsey, with Andrews being much younger. Obviously, Kelsey has been much more consistent and stable, but that really just means you're pushing Hollywood Brown. Like, I feel like Hollywood Brown has too much of a say here in this. I would choose the Ravens over the Chiefs. I think Pacheco and Hollywood are just too average for me to put him there in the final four. But I mean, it is Mahomes and Kelsey, so I can't
Yeah.
hate you too much for it.
Yeah, Mahomes and Kelsey gives them a big bump. I think Rashee Rice is going to be special again. And again, he's not going to have to get used to Mahomes and get adjusted to him. He's going to be in year two. They're going to be rolling. He's just going to know the offense. And I think Pacheco doesn't get the credit he deserves here because, again, this team wants to be a passing team, and sometimes they can be more judicious with the way they use the running game. So that said, I think we have a good group here, and excited to see what these offenses do to build further in the draft, which is, I guess, the April version of madness for these NFL teams.
So who would you have winning the whole tournament, the 49ers or the Lions? Because I feel like Purdy and Goff are pretty similar. Then you have Christian McCaffrey, who you have to put over Gibbs and Monty. But Amon-Ra St. Brown does beat out Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel pretty easily for me. And then Laporta and Kittle, I think Laporta is way more consistent. So it really comes down to, are you just taking the 49ers because how good Christian McCaffrey is? Or would you go with the Lions because they're all the way across a little bit more, consistent with their fantasy points?
Yeah, I think the Lions have a little bit more. I think in a way, having Gibbs and Montgomery give them two options in the backfield that are very viable for fantasy. And you mentioned the good points on St. Brown and Laporta actually being the best options at wide receiver and tight end among these teams. Yeah, it's pretty close, but again, I think McCaffrey might be the tiebreaker in the end. He's just so good and puts up a lot of points. So let's say the Lions of the deep bench that has a lot of guys coming off to contribute, where I think if you're looking for the one-man domination to put them over the top, you look at McCaffrey. So the 49ers have the best player, and you can argue that puts them in the best offense, where I think the Lions have the best volume and quantity there to match their quality.
Man, we just talking through these offenses, it gets me very excited for
Yeah.
fantasy this upcoming year. These teams are getting stacked across the league. That was hard to narrow down to even 8, let alone 4. But that is it for today's show. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every dayers. Vinny will be back tomorrow. I will actually
Next
be
week.
out tomorrow and all next week, but Vinny's going to go through all of his awesome draft content. He is much smarter about the NFL draft prospects than I am. So you're going to learn a ton from him while I'm out. Have a great week, everybody. Bye, y'all.